Okay, hi everybody. It's been an interesting morning. I've been trying out different recording devices and things, and what seems to have worked well with the podcast that I'm doing, which is just audio, which is this amazing headset that I borrowed from my husband, does not work well with the equipment that I was trying to use for this video website. So, not website, but video creation. So I lost a 22-minute video that I think was pretty creatively flowing and I think might have been interesting. So if I get a little bit stale on this one, I'm so sorry, but that's not the point. It's inevitable that things happen and there's a learning curve, and I don't have the patience for that. So I have to learn to have the patience. So I've got this crazy contraption here. I want to show you. Okay, it just came off as I was doing this. Like, I've got some sort of storage box, and then I've got a really awesome seaweed box, and then I've got my cell phone stand, and I had something under the cell phone stand to hold that up even more. So I don't know how you vloggers do this without going crazy with all the details and the learning curve at the beginning of this. I appreciate all of you. And now there's this giant white space above me, but I think this is better than the double chin bill of the last video. So we will stick, oh, maybe if I go sideways, this will be better. Oh no, that looks really bizarrely artistic for no reason. Okay, we're just gonna stick with this. And for anybody who's wondering, this red door behind me, is simply just a red door in my apartment. This is great, actually. These, you can put your fingers through. I don't know if that's coming through, but yeah. So that's the entrance into the bedroom. I'm currently sitting in the living room, and I just really like the color red. So, and since this video is about the Chinese language, this is kind of a traditional Chinese door, although it's not very old. It's definitely not old. And it's not going to last much longer either. It's not made very well. But whatever, just in case you're wondering, I just like the juxtaposition of the color red in the picture, because the rest of the apartment is super cute, but very, very, very white. So the background's pretty bad. So there's that lovely tidbit. So I promised 2 videos a week to keep me on track. Video 1 is progress video, which I've already done for this week, so that's not coming until next Tuesday. Video 2 is the one that we're doing now, which is just something about the language as I'm learning it that seems kind of interesting, or that I want to share, or in this case, I'm kind of like throwing out a line and asking for your help and advice and any information that you have on learning a second language that's drastically different visually, whether it be Chinese as a second language or any other language that is seriously, seriously different to look at. So I'm also going to try to piece together a few things with this one that I haven't done before, but that's after it's recorded. So hopefully the visuals will come into this, and to be able to show you the current roadblock that I'm having, or that I've had for a really, really long time, with learning to read the Chinese language. So the main things I'm going to focus on in this video are spaces in, again, with reading the Chinese language, spaces or lack thereof, and giving up my linguistic crutch that I've been using for years, and I'll explain that in more detail. But to rewind a little bit more, for those of you who haven't watched any other videos, hi there, my name is Stephanie, and I'm living in a Chinese-speaking environment, for Chinese language environment, speaking, reading, all that kind of stuff, for the 3rd time in my life. I first lived in Taiwan in 2003. I lived in southern Taiwan in a place where Mandarin Chinese and Taiwanese, which are 2 very different languages, coexisted. So that was my first obstacle, along with it being the first time I was in Asia and all the culture shock that comes with that. But I've got a podcast covering that, so I will put the link somewhere here so you can check that out if you so wish. So that information is in there. But that was the first time I was in a Chinese-speaking environment. The second one, or Chinese language environment, because it's not just speaking, because there's so much visualness that comes with being in that kind of environment, isn't there? I mean, everywhere you look, everything you have in your hand or see or experience is written in that language, right? So the second time was when I lived in Nanjing, China, which is about 60 minutes on a fast train, a bullet train, west of where I am now. And that was about 5 years ago. And we were there for 1 year, and then in Shanghai for about 3 or 4 months after that. And then we went to grad school in the States. Now I'm back in Shanghai, China. I've been back for about 3 or 4 months, and I'm sick and tired of doing the survival tip that I'm going to show you today. And by tip, I mean something that kind of works most of the time, some of the time, but it's frustrating enough because meaning's still not conveyed, but you're able to do whatever action you're looking to do. And that'll make more sense with the example from the subway from my yesterday experience. Yeah, because my English is good already, so I need a second language. From my experience on the subway yesterday in Shanghai. Yeah. So let's jump in. So with in those 3 Chinese language environments, I've learned some survival tips. One of them is just matching characters. Depending on, like if you have something in your hand, like a character or a phrase or a sentence or whatnot, and you're looking to match it to something else, for me, I've relied on a few different things. One is a lot of the characters are pictorially based, right? So is there a character that you can hone in on first that looks like a house or there's a mouth one that looks like a box? Recognizable, and here's the trick, few stroke characters that you can match between the 2 texts. So I usually start with that. Can you count the number of strokes? Are the strokes going in the right direction? All of this came about without knowing much about the Chinese language to begin with, so they're not Chinese language specific skills. They're just visually looking at 2 things and, spot the difference kind of skills from elementary school. Remember those books when you had to spot the difference and circle the differences? That came in handy when I first moved to China, right? So there's a lot of that can be done. And I've used that in a number of occasions. And yesterday, my husband and I decided to go up line 11 in Shanghai, and we'd heard that there was a Germantown, and we were like, oh yay, cool, something different, right? Let's go to Germantown in Shanghai. How strange is that? There's this whole neighborhood that was supposed to exist with German-style architecture, and we were hoping restaurants and shops and just something different, right? Because who would expect to find a German neighborhood in Shanghai? I know, there's Chinatowns all over the world. Why aren't there other places in China? There are. Just not here. We ended up walking around a ton and not really finding it. We found one German bar, but there's tons of those in the city center anyway, so that really wasn't terribly different. Shanghai's a very, very international city. You can find so much, even just within the more immediate parts of the city center. So that wasn't quite what we were looking for. But what I want to show you is my experience on the subway yesterday is a really good way to show you how I've survived with Chinese so far and what I want to stop doing. Okay, so I'm going to show you, there are 2 things I was looking at as I was on the subway. The subway line we were going on split into, it started out just going on one line, and then it split into going to one endpoint or going to another endpoint, and we need to, nothing shocking there, this is subways. This is what subway maps look like, right? So we needed to know which endpoint this one was going to. We were going down the escalator, and the train came, so we just jumped on it. So we didn't have time to look at the actual signs behind us, the digital signs in the station. So we just jumped on it, and now that we're on the train, we had 2 things at our disposal. One was the digital sign that was telling us the next stop, and the other one was the train map in the static written train map in the train car itself. And so I was using those 2 things I had about 5 or 6 stops between when we got on the train to figure out if we needed to transfer to the same line, same side, but different train going to the different end stop. So I had a little bit of time, but very different language, wasn't sure where the information was going to be. So I started staring at the train, the digital train thing that was showing, like, I was facing it in the train. And then over to the right was the static train map. So I was trying to match characters. I was trying to match the two endpoints on the static train map to my right with the information that was moving on the digital screen in front of me. All the while, not one single character on the digital screen was familiar to me. As of right now, I know a really small handful. Most of them are basic building blocks, not necessarily words that are going to show up in a functional way, like on a subway saying next stop is blah, blah, blah. So I wasn't terribly surprised about that. What it reminded me of, though, is the space issue. In the English language, between words, there are spaces. Even at the end of a sentence, after punctuation, there are spaces, whether it be one or two, probably depends on when you learned how to type. Yeah. Okay, wait. In my typing class in junior high, and yes, I had a typing class. That's how old I am. We used to get marks taken off or points taken off if we had a period or, whatever end punctuation, and then didn't have two spaces. Is that still happening? Do we really still put two spaces after end punctuation, or did that change? Because I feel like looking at text since then, now that I'm thinking about it, I feel that it's changed back to one, or changed to one space afterwards, because two would stick out in this modern age of everything's online, and there'd be too much white space on a digital platform. Anyway, would love to hear your comments on that in the comment area below, because I'm very, very curious about that. When did we switch from two spaces at the end to one? I'm assuming that we did, because it looks like we don't do that anymore. It looks like that was a typewriter-based habit, and I am really glad that's gone. That was really annoying. Okay, finish the sentence, punctuation, space, space. That's not organic. That's awkward. Anyway, yay typing class. Thanks, Mr. Fink. My typing teacher had a stand, a German French fry, ironically, a German French fry stand at our local weekly farmers market, which was mostly fried food and not produce. There's a lot to unpack in that one. But he was also part-time our typing teacher. Anyway, interesting, German, I hadn't made that connection till now. Point being, we're focusing on spaces. So there are set spaces in the English language and other languages, and there are languages that don't have as many spaces or don't have spaces at all. I don't understand yet what the spacing rules are in Chinese. I have tried to find this information in all three places that I've lived where Chinese is the local language, and granted, nowadays the most information is available, so I think I'll get closer to finding that information online, I hope, than in previous incarnations of my Chinese language environment. However, if you know, please tell me, because so much of learning Chinese online is based on speaking, and I get it. I totally get it. I just don't want to do it. So if you know, if there are written versions of the rules of how to space and how not to space, and how you figure out words if there are no spaces, which is what I think is happening with the language, by all means, please let me know, because I am thoroughly and completely confused with this. My English spacing obsession and my Chinese, trying to read Chinese, is just hitting again and again and again. I want a separation between words. And I'm still struggling with radical versus character. Even though I know radicals build up to characters, there's a disconnect for me, because in English we have letters, then words. But radicals are not like letters, and then words are not like characters. They are, but they aren't. Because, or are they? No, I feel like they're very, very different. And that one-to-one correlation I'm trying to do in my head is part of what's doing me in. So if you have tried to learn Chinese, please let me know how you get past your trying to view Chinese through your first language. Because my previous attempts at this have not worked, and I think getting comfortable with the visualness of it before I really, really dive into this might But I'm totally open to this. Please help, because I want to get past it this time. I want to be able to read. To be honest with you, I want to be able to read the Chinese language, and I don't know how to do that without visually trying to put in spaces where I think the word boundaries are. Okay, so back to the train. So I'm trying to match, because both of the endpoints of the trains that we could possibly be on had 3 characters. Awesome. So I was trying to match either of the 3 characters with the digital train message that was telling us where we were going. As you can see in the video of the digital train message, it had both Mandarin and English. Awesome. But the English part only told us the next stop. It didn't tell us the endpoint. So we weren't able to tell just from that, which made this challenge challenging. Redundancy, intentional. So what I did was, because I didn't know the meaning of either of the 2 endpoints that could have been in the digital part of the message that on the train, I made up a little visual thing to help me, because looking to my right and then looking in front of me very quickly as the text is moving on the digital screen in a different language where the meaning I didn't know and the characters I weren't terribly familiar with didn't help. So again, I'm on this time frame because we've got about 5 or 6 stops before we would need to transfer if we were on the wrong train. Pressure. So I ended up doing something very silly, which I want to stop doing in the future. This is just to give you an example of my Chinese survival skills up to now. Of the 3 characters, I looked at the top of the first one and it looked like a fishbone to me, so I just thought fishbone. The second character at that time looked like a person. Now it looks more like a tree, but it looked like a person. So I thought fishbone, person, and the third one looked like a house. So I switched from looking right at those 3 characters to the top, the endpoint at the top, the first one, the one we wanted to go to. So I was looking for those 3 characters, fishbone, person, house. And then I looked over at the digital screen that was moving, not super quickly as you can see, but quick enough when you're not familiar with the language to be tricky. And I just kept thinking to myself in my head, where is fishbone, person, house, fishbone, person, house, fishbone, person, house, as I was watching the digital screen. And lo and behold, it was there. So I assumed that on the digital screen they would say, this train is headed towards blah, 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 not this train is not headed towards. So I figured, since I matched the endpoint we wanted with what was on the digital screen in Mandarin, that meant we were on the right train. Because who would say you're not on the right, or this isn't going to this point, right? It turns out that was actually true, and they did, when we hit the point where you'd have to transfer to go to the other line, they made an announcement in both languages that you could transfer to the other point then. But we didn't have to, because we were on the right train. But does the meaning of this, this subway station stop, does that mean fishbone, person, house? Hell no, of course it doesn't. But that was something I just did so I could very quickly scan the text that I didn't know how to read. So this is one of my literacy skills, literacy skills, and I want to switch that via trying to learn the language and learn to read the language. Switch that over from making up silly things that have no meaning to actually having meaning. But the spaces, as you can see from the digital train thing, it's not like they said they had in Mandarin even chunks of this train is headed towards space, blah, 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 the name of the endpoint. There was no space at all. It was just all clumped together. And I had to just look for the 3 characters I was looking for, which were at the end of it, which made it a little bit easier because there was a space, because that was the end of the message. So I did still rely on a space to help me out there, but there was no space between the endpoint, the name of the subway stop, and the meaning that they were trying to convey about the subway stop before it. How does one deal with a lack of space in a text with characters that have so many strokes? Seriously, okay, a lot of these characters have a lot of strokes, and I guess with more recognition, you get more familiar with the strokes or the characters, and you recognize them more quickly. But for a newbie, looking at something that has 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 strokes and trying to recognize, it's going this way instead of this way, so it must mean this, not this, that takes cognitive load, serious time to think of. And when you're reading something that's long, how much time does it take you to get through a line of text to understand what it means, not just say, I recognize these characters? This is sort of a long-term thing. Again, I'm still learning the basic characters, which hopefully lead up to being able to read lines of text, albeit slowly at first, is what I'm guessing. But I'm just very, very curious. This has been something that has stopped me every time I've tried to learn Mandarin, and it's not going to stop me this time, damn it. I'm going to get past this. But I'm very, very curious. What have you guys used to get past this? Or have you had this space issue? Or have you just completely immersed yourself in the language as it is and not hit this issue at all? And how do you do that? Because my English language interference into not being able to comfortably transition to reading Chinese and to recognizing characters is pretty intense. It's still very early in the game, but this is my third time around trying to do it, and man oh man. Spaces. I had no idea I was that attached to white space. I thought I liked color and sound and vibrancy, and white spaces is none of those things, but in writing and reading, I want it. I need it, but it's not there. And if I want to learn to read the language, I need to get used to it not being there, and I need some sort of survival skills that lean on the literacy side, not the illiteracy side, like the fishbone crap I did yesterday. It got me what I needed, but that's not going to help me read a newspaper or a menu or a magazine or a website. So this is a huge obstacle to me. So I'm really, really curious what people do to get past this. I'm going to keep researching online to see if I can find anybody explain this, but to be honest with you, most of the information is about an individual character. And this is so similar to when I was learning coding. I was learning Python and SQL and HTML and a bunch of languages last year for some classes I was taking and some projects I was working on. And it was the same kind of problem now that I think about it. It was little bits of information were available, but putting it in a context where it was functional was not available. And this is the same problem that happens a lot of times when people try to learn vocabulary in a language. And I saw my students doing this. They would learn a bit of vocabulary, but they didn't ever see it in its used form. So that a lot of word form errors would happen where they'd say, I am boring today, when they want to say, I am bored. That kind of thing. Or they'd say, it is excitingly, instead of it is excited. Or I am excited, I am excitedly. Like they would do that because they didn't actually see that vocabulary that they were looking at in a used form. So they didn't get the whole word chunks. They didn't get the whole sentence. They didn't get the context in which that word was used. They've just memorized the meaning. And that's what it felt like with coding. There was a little bit, use this bit of code to send the information to the database. Okay, but where do I put that code? What do I put before and after it? And they're assuming that you know how to syntactically decorate that code, which a lot of times I didn't, because I was just pulling stuff left, right, and center, trying different things, and people are using different platforms to write the code, and it was messy. It was messy because it was a language, just like this is a language. And how do you get past that? Clearly, lots of people do. Lots of people do. But this has been a big one for a long time, and I am willing to wait this out. Willing to push through. Because I think if I can do that this time, with the internet, with smartphone apps, there's so much. And with WeChat, if I could get on WeChat and be able to communicate in Chinese, people I can talk to just explodes. And by talk to, I mean like text talk to. Because again, I'm not focusing on pronunciation at all. It's not my strong suit. It's not where my own creative expression comes out, blah. Yes, I understand that I'm speaking in this video. I got it. Anyway, and that's part of why I'm stumbling so much, is because I am much more comfortable as a writer than as a speaker. But that's a whole other ball game. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I really, really look forward to your comments and whatnot, and feedback and tips and all of that. And please, by all means, subscribe if you want to be a part of this madness. At least 2 videos a week is what I'm promising. There could be more. I'm also going to post this on Twitter. So if you're on Twitter, Steph Fuccio is my username there. So feel free to retweet that as well. Invite other folks along to this madness. If you know anybody studying Chinese, please let them know. Please let me know. Let's do this together, you know? But I have a feeling this is not just an English to Chinese issue, this space issue, this orthography kind of interference obstacle thing. I think it's much bigger than that, and I think that there are more tips out there than I can find. I think by looking on how to read Chinese while dealing with these spaces, I'm getting too specific with my searches. So that's it. That's my goal, is to get less specific with the searches to get past this issue, because this is a mountain that is worth climbing. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. I will see you next week. Bye.